Our guest tonight on Karibu is award-winning musician and social activist Simphiwe Dana. Hey, welcome to Karibu, sis.
Hello, Mike. Thank you for having me.
You know, I was looking at your photos before you came here. And in your many different disguises. And I was wondering what you're going to be looking like tonight, right?
Do I look nice?
You look nice.
Okay,
You look beautiful.
yeah.
You look stunning.
Thank
You
you
look
very
stunning.
much.
And I'm looking at your hair. So I'm not going to start our conversation before we go to the hair issue.
Okay, shoot.
Now the whole conversation about hair. I see you wearing your hair quite liberally, quite freely.
Yes.
There has been a conversation about black hair and weaves. I know, for example, Ubrahiu will not talk to or be associated.
Well, he's fine with mine because
Yeah.
it looks like an afro.
Yes,
I said, well,
yes.
yours at least looks
Yeah,
like.
yeah.
So I can take a picture
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. But what do you think about fashion today in South Africa, where it's going? Do you think some people say it's being colonized, it's being westernized too much? You know, like, for example, people
Yes.
putting on weaves, etc. Some people say, well, you know, it's a
Well,
free
I
country.
mean, you know, like the issue of the weave, Neputwam, it's a very complex one. You know, if you even look historically how these things did exist in the past before colonialism. You know, women and their hair is just a very it's a complex issue, right? And then obviously then came colonization, right, with all of its different forms of oppression, including where we're supposed to hide our hair all the time because it was not good to look at, you know, according to our masters at the time, which then gave many black women a complex about their hair. And I think that the whole thing, Yoktwala, you know, it came out of that. It's not necessarily because it was our culture to tie, you know, to hide our hair. There is a line of thought anyways that says that the whole issue of us covering our hair came out of that colonial mentality that our hair was not good to look at and should be kept away.
And like hidden away from view.
So for me, the fixation with how women wear their hair, and I think it's just really misplaced. I mean, there are many, many issues that we could be dealing with that affect women. You know, our fixation with this one thing, for me, it just speaks of control. You know,
Control of whom by whom?
well, just we've always been told as women how we must do this, how we must do that. You know, society has put itself as, I don't know, some kind of not big boss, but we have to toe a certain line as women. We have to dress a certain way. We have to look a certain way. We cannot walk at this time of the night. What are you doing there? You know, a woman does not do this. There are many, many rules that society has put for women that I think are really misplaced, and it's just a continuation of this whole project that women must be kept under foot, must be controlled. And I think it's really misplaced. I mean, if you think of South Africa, for instance, we have many, many problems. I mean, rape is a huge problem in South Africa. And that also stems out of the same patriarchy that then wants to tell us how to dress and stuff. So for me, it just seems like it's not sincere, this concern. Because if really we were concerned for women, we would deal with the issues that affect them the most, that are more apparent. I mean, the issue of weaves, we all don't dress a certain way that is supposed to be African, right? Except on certain occasions or here and there. Generally, why isn't this more encompassing? Why are we not talking about how we don't dress in our own styles? We don't make our own clothes. We don't
Like we
promote
used to,
our own.
you know, yeah.
Like we used to. So for me, it just seems disingenuous, really, this whole concern.
Okay. Now, I wanted to ask you, because you are one of the most outspoken artists about social issues, you know, not just about music, but about, you know, a whole lot of things, whether you're talking about language or culture all of those things. Now, your outspokenness, has it always been there, and where did it come from?
Actually, that's a very interesting question, because I'm not sure if it's always been there. But one thing that I know is that I have always been very honest about what I think of anything. But the social consciousness, I think, would come later. But the honesty has always been there. I've always been bluntly honest to a fault, actually, where I would have to worry about friendships because I said something and I wasn't thinking how like the other person would receive it, because I was just telling it like how I see it.
Yeah, and before you know it, the friendship is written off.
It's kaput. And it was not malicious. It was not intentionally, malicious. So
and where did it come from? Is it from your upbringing, the outspokenness?
I do think it's from my upbringing, because I'm a village girl. And in the village, honesty is quite revered in many ways. I don't know. I guess maybe it's because we have to trust each other so that we can protect each other. You know, in the village, people are quite vulnerable for many different reasons. So I grew up in a space where, like, a very open society. And I do think, I've never had to think about it, but now that you've put me on the spot, I do think it's got to do a lot with my upbringing.
That you don't hold back, you don't.
Yes, I'm very honest. But now on the issue of social consciousness, I also don't know how it came about, but I know that I've always been very concerned about my environment and what happens around me. I was that kid who was always taking in stray animals. I found them on the street, and I'm gonna nurse them back to health. I was a staunch Christian when I was young. I would preach to the kids at school. I would fast and take them up the mountain to go and pray. So I have that personality in me as well. My friend Tabor calls it the artist consciousness or conscience. So I think my activism stems out of that as well. It's something that I believe I was born with, to try and fix my environment.
But you also seem to be quite, engaged with a whole lot of social issues. You seem to be aware of many things, whether it's politics or culture or those kinds of things. How do you keep yourself abreast of things? Do you read? Do you watch tapes? Do you, how do you keep yourself informed?
I'm a bookworm, even though I must say now with the advent of social media, I read less, which is quite sad. I'm a bookworm, so that is how I keep informed about the world around me. But also social media helps a lot to know what's happening in real time.
And your kids?
My children.
Do you also get them to read?
Yes, my kids have to read for at least 30 minutes every night. The one, I didn't even have to, try and instill that in her. She's already a bookworm. The other one has learned to love to read.
Kind of a mother are you? Are you?
I'm not a very strict mother. I'm not at all. I'm friends with my kids because I'd like to be the first person that they think of when they're in trouble or something is going on in their lives. So I try and keep that friendship with them. But I'm also strict when called to be, and they respect that. They understand that when mommy puts her foot down, mommy puts her foot down. But I do not discipline as in hit the kids. Though I'm not saying I'm against it, but I don't feel the need for it.
Oh, okay.
I think there are other ways you can get kids to toe the line, when necessary.
Now, to go to a different subject altogether, you still an ambassador for
Amnesty International,
Africa Not for Sale campaign.
Yes.
What was that campaign about?
The campaign was a youthful campaign. It was basically the youth stating what makes them happy and unhappy about the continent. And it came out strongly that they feel like Africa is rising. There's this whole narrative that Africa is rising, but it's rising for who? Who is it rising for? Who is benefiting from this rise on the continent? And they felt that all the outsiders are the ones who are benefiting from this Africa rising, but then the natives of the continent, their situation continues to be unchanged. So it came out that then how is it possible that Africa is rising but not for its people? Is it neocolonialism? And if it is, in what form? And then how can we counter it? And that's how the campaign came about.
Now, to talk about you, for the purposes of now, I would include you among the youth. Among the youth,
I'm not the youth anymore.
When you because what I often ask,
but in Zimbabwe,
my
I'm
guests,
still the youth.
Oh, you're still the youth. Why in Zimbabwe?
Because the age limit for youth is 45.
Ah, okay, all right. Even I could squeeze myself in there.
Yes,
I think.
you could squeeze yourself in there.
Now, when you what I often ask, my guests is when you looking at the continent, just off the back of this campaign that we've just spoken about, when you look at the continent today, what are the things that really concern you?
The one biggest issue that stands in the way of our progress is lack of unity on the continent, and it's actually worrisome that more than 50 years after the formation of the OAU and now the AU, we have not cracked that. If you look at all the visa laws, the xenophobia, at least it's just us who are seen as xenophobic on the continent at the moment. But there are many fractures that keep us from working together
as Africans.
On the continent for the progress of the continent. For instance, why go all the way to China to get people to come and build a railway when we here in SA, we've got the capacity and the infrastructure to do it? Why are we not doing business amongst each other? Why do we always need to bring in, to send our money outside for us to get what we need on the continent, So there's lots of disunity, and most of it also, it continues to be along colonial lines. And
how do you mean along colonial lines?
As in, West Africa is on its own.
Oh, the Francophone.
The Portuguese, the English. There's that. And also then like the borders that, were imposed on the continent. We are adamant about keeping those borders, and I don't understand why. I don't understand why it's more difficult and expensive to travel on the continent than it is to travel outside the continent. And if we continue to be like that, then we really stifle business, because if I cannot travel, then it's difficult for me to do business with different African countries.
You travel a lot around the world from time to time. I don't know how much travel you've had time to do of late. Now, when you're away and you're thinking back to Africa, what do you miss? What do you like that you miss about the continent?
Say
you're in Germany
being at
or some other
home.
place.
There's no place like home. And it's funny because I can be anywhere on the continent and feel the same way. I'm home. Whereas the minute I jump and I go to Europe, I go to the US, I don't feel home anymore. It's a thing. I mean, I was in Addis just now. When I landed and I inhaled the air, it felt like a different kind of home, and I got excited. There's something about home, and knowing that you are in a space where you don't feel you stick out, or you have to watch yourself, how you speak, who you speak to. There's something to that cannot be duplicated anywhere else that feeling except for home.
I want us to talk about Black consciousness, but let's talk first about Steve Biko. You know, your relationship with him, not in the flesh, but as a historical figure. What attracted you to him as a historical? What do you like about him?
I first heard of Steve Biko when I was in junior school. Must have been standard 4, standard 5. Excuse me. And they had played a bioscope. Those days we had bioscopes.
Yeah. With a big wheel going.
Yes. And the movie was Cry, the Beloved Country.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Ellen Payton's thing.
Yes. Was it Cry, the Beloved Country? Like the story of Steve Biko as told.
Oh, Cry Freedom.
That's
Cry Freedom, the Steve Biko one, yeah.
Yes. That's when I first got introduced to Steve Biko. And I mean, it actually was funny that was flighted at a time that was like very repressive in South Africa. And anything to do with freedom, Amandla, was normally shut down. But perhaps because we were in the Transkei, maybe that's why we were privy to stuff that normally we wouldn't have been privy to. Because I also remember someone telling me that how could I have heard Miriam Makeba when she was banned? And then I had to think about it, but I did hear her when I was growing up.
Yeah, that you're not supposed to have heard.
Yes, and then only now I realized, it could be because in the Transkei, we were supposed to be a different country, as a homeland. So perhaps things that were not allowed in South Africa could be seen and heard in the Transkei.
You were talking about Steve Biko in another place, and you were saying that one of the things you liked about him was that he wanted Black people to love themselves. Do you think Black people don't love themselves enough?
I think Black people don't love themselves enough, and I do not blame them. I mean, even Steve Biko explained it very well. How we have been so stripped of our humanity, dehumanized in many ways, and how we were bombarded with an infusion of self-hate, so that we would be removed from our humanity. We would not see ourselves as deserving of the same rights as other human beings, and how that will have to be dealt with first before we can endeavor to, develop and become like other countries. And I mean, for instance, if you are to take the issue now of the 90% local music thing, it is a perfect example of self-hate. How in a country 20 years after, the local music industry was dying because there was no willpower to embrace our own. It was not cool enough. We just didn't cut it as local musicians. Even as much as there had been a very vibrant time in the music industry in SA, and that was like post 94 until early 2000s. And I mean, if you even check now that we're coming back to ourselves, the music that's playing is from that time, because that was a time when we revered our own. And then that wore off very quickly, and we went back to the self-hate that we had been fed and we had grown up on. That is a very clear example of what happens when people do not deal with their stripped humanity. And therefore, I believe that Steve Biko's works and words should be introduced in schools. It should be part of our history. Maybe, have some kind of sociology program that teaches Black love. I don't know in what kind of form, because I don't believe that this Black love should only be taught to Black kids. It should be taught to everyone.
You mean including the different races.
Yes, so that they actually understand and appreciate our blackness instead of seeing it as an annoyance from the comrades, black this, black that. I mean, even us talking about black love, it's seen as something that is othering or that is exclusive. And therefore, if it's exclusive, it alienates, We can't be saying black love in that light after hundreds of years of dehumanization. We should be more empathetic.
I want us to talk about feminism.
Yes.
Because it seems to be such a contentious subject, but also it seems to be understood differently by different people.
Yes.
But you've been in the middle of the debate. So I thought I should ask you, Uguti, from where you're standing.
Aren't I always in the middle of debates?
From where you're standing, what just define it for me?
Feminism is the belief that both men and women are equal and should be treated as such. Plain and simple.
It is not saying women must have more rights than men or that kind of thing.
Not even close.
It is more a movement of equality.
Yes. That's all the movement is about. And it's quite sad that patriarchy is so pervasive that even the people that we fight in the trenches with when it comes to racism do not acknowledge their privilege as men. And how our agency is not treated with the urgency it should be treated with. We are seen as we are complaining, or we are anti-men, or we talk too much, first let's deal with the most important struggle, the struggle of blackness. As if
I was going to ask you that.
Anti-black.
Yes, I was going to ask you that to say, why do we still need feminism when there were so many women involved in the struggle? Even in leadership positions, there were lots of women. People like Abu Ruth First, Abu Mama Albertina.
Because
Sisulu,
even during
Winnie
then,
Mandela, there's a long.
Even then, like
list.
there were hierarchical demarcations. Even then, women were still treated as less, which is why even now, if you are told of leaders of the movement, women don't really feature much. They were there and they actually played a huge role, but you won't see them as, being marketed the same way that your Water Sisulus were and your OR Tambos were. Because women even then were relegated to second place. We have not dealt with gender issues in South Africa in a way that actually helps us deal effectively and do away with patriarchy, because many of us do not see anything wrong with patriarchy. And the reason why many of us do not see anything wrong with patriarchy is because it advantages them, right? The same way that you will fight until you are blue in the face, but white people do not want to acknowledge their racism. In fact, they act like they don't even understand what this racism that you're talking about is. Exactly. It's because when you have the privilege, you see it as normal that you should have that privilege. You don't see anything wrong with it. You believe that you are born special. It's your birthright to have those privileges. The same way men do believe, and they say it openly, that they are the head of the house. They are not equal to women.
But some people
women should never see themselves as equal to men.
The same men will say it's part of our culture. What do you say to that?
Exactly
to say this
that.
Is African culture.
Now, patriarchy is pervasive all over the world, regardless of whether you call it your culture or not. Perhaps because of our origins of hunter-gatherer and this and this and that, and who's stronger. But patriarchy exists in most cultures. I would even say 99% of cultures across the world. And just because it exists does not mean it's right. It just means that it was easy for it to fester during those times. The same way that at some point colonialism was easy to it festered easily. There was no one to stop it, right? But at some point we did stop it. And even post-colonialism, we still have racism that is pervasive still, and we are still dealing with it. So just because it was your culture does not mean that it was right. Nothing is set in stone. I mean, for instance, if we look at infibulation, for instance, where women's labia and clitoris are cut off, and it's supposed to be culture. Yeah. Right. We now see that it, just because we call it culture does not mean that it was the right thing to do. It was patriarchy at work. So we had a culture of patriarchy that we have to unlearn because it disadvantages women.
What role do you see men playing any role in the feminist movement?
Definitely.
Or is it only for women?
Definitely. The same way that Steve Biko said of white people. No, we welcome them in the movement as long as they know that their role is not to come here and postulate. Their role is to go back to their communities and convert their community so that they won't be racist anymore. Because already, as a black person, I'm at a disadvantage. I'm on the back foot. I'm seen as less. So why would a white person listen to me, to what I have to say about racism? They don't even see me. To them, I'm invisible, except as a lowly worker, blah, blah, blah. So same with patriarchy as well. Men do not respect a woman's voice. You'll be told, what kind of a woman speaks so much, this and this and this and that. In a patriarchal setting, women are on the back foot. They are seen as less. Therefore, whatever they say does not hold weight to a patriarchal society. But if the men would speak the same language as the women are speaking to the very same communities, we might see change much quicker. And also we have to understand that if we cannot say that people that are rapists are monsters and blah, 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 when we actually create a society that is conducive for that kind of behavior. And by conducive, I mean that patriarchy as a culture, it oppresses women. It makes women to be seen as less. It objectifies them. It makes them to not be seen as human on the same level as men see each other as human. Okay. Therefore, we are objects to be used and discarded, and to be controlled and to be oppressed. We are basically seen in many ways as just here to make men's lives comfortable. We are not seen as having autonomy as women, and that is a patriarchal culture that then trickles down to issues where it creates environments that are pro-rape culture. So therefore, we will never, ever, ever do away with rape as long as patriarchy remains.
So
we can preach until we are blue. There's a completely direct connection. We can preach until we are blue about how rapists are monsters and this and this and this and that. As long as we create an environment where it's fertile grounds for such to exist, it will not end.
But how do we change that? Because these, as you are saying, that the patriarchy is it's all pervasive in society, not only in South Africa, everywhere else. For the purposes of us in South Africa, what can we do to turn things around?
We have to stop saying that patriarchy is part of our culture. We have to be willing to revise our culture. Because also, like, you must understand that when colonialism happened to us, it stunted our evolution. We might have evolved out of that long ago, out of that patriarchy, but we held on to everything we had known of ourselves, because that's all we knew. And we knew that colonialism, its main agenda is to strip us of that humanity, and which humanity is informed by our culture, our culture mainly, our language, our culture is what informs our humanity. Therefore, we then held on so tightly to everything that we had been before colonialism came to our shores. Even the bad things, we held on to them. Whereas perhaps had our evolution not been disturbed, we might have evolved quicker out of that mode of thinking that women are less and men are more.
In one of the heated engagements that you had on social media, you said that there's an attempt to silence women.
Yes.
What did you mean by that?
The attempt to silence women is seeing feminism as an enemy of men. It's seeing feminism as anti-men. Right. For instance, when this Mabel Jansen story broke, right, much of what she said was blamed on feminists. Yeah, feminists already think like that anyways, that all men are rapists and this and this and that. So Mabel has learned this from feminists. And us feminists were sitting there like, when have we ever said that we hate men? And, rape culture is black men culture. We've never, in fact, we were the first ones to protest when that story broke. But what does this woman mean that rape culture is black culture? So there is, and I think it's intentional because it's meant to silence. Even when we protest and say no, just because we want men to be held accountable the same way that women are held accountable does not mean that we don't like men. But you saying that is because you actually do not want to do away with your privileges. You are fighting to keep the privileges by silencing women with words like, you are anti-men, you hate men. Why would we hate men? We have no reason to hate men whatsoever. We want to rehabilitate men so that they stop thinking that we are objects here for their own pleasure.
Before we get off the subject of gender, do you have any plans to go into acting?
I have one movie under my belt. Thank you.
Okay, I missed that.
It was a very emotionally draining movie. In this movie, it's called A Boy Called Temba. It's about this woman who's raising her kids on her own, and the father went to the mines and disappeared there. And then some shyster comes who's HIV positive and infects her. And while she's sick and this layabout does nothing, she goes and finds a job, and she's sick there. And then her kids, like very heavy, and then like one of her kids gets abused by this man. So it was a emotionally heavy movie, and I think I did well. So yes, I would like to act more in the future, but I'm not an actor, so it would have to be roles that are custom made for me, like that one was.
And how about this? If you were to go acting, if you were to be offered a role to act somebody, which woman? We've just spoken about women leaders in South Africa. Which woman would you like kill to portray?
Mina Makeba, Winnie Mandela, Winnie Mandela, Mina Makeba. Who else?
What do you admire about
those
them?
two actually just jumped out at me.
But what do you admire about those two?
I admire the fact that they did not see themselves as women. They saw themselves as human beings. And everything that they did was informed by wanting to write the world that they live in, beyond the confines of gender.
Okay. Now I'm going to ask you a in inverted commas, a silencing question.
Oh no.
Do you think black women are angry with black men in South Africa today? Would that be a correct statement? Or
I would be surprised if they were not. The same way that when Penny Sparrow says something stupid, you see the black anger that comes out of it. I don't know why women would not, be not allowed, but be understood. Like their anger would be understood and seen as valid, given everything that women go through.
Are you angry? What makes you angry?
Injustice of any kind makes me angry. Yes.
whether it's gender
whether it's gender
race
or race or whatever, or some other kind of abuse.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I'm angry, but the question is, what do I do with that anger? How do I channel that anger?
Mm-hmm.
That is the most important question, not whether or not we are angry, because we should be angry. Black people should be angry. Women should be angry. Homosexuals should be angry. Any group of people that is oppressed, their anger is valid.
Are you a spiritual person?
I think I am a spiritual person. I say I think because I do not belong to any group, religious group or spiritual group or otherwise. But I believe that what I do is very sacred and godly. It's a divine, yes. It's a very divine undertaking. And therefore, because it's a spiritual thing, it is very sensitive, right? I should not write a song under certain conditions. I should not go and sing under certain conditions, kind of.
Give us an example. If you're saying you should not go and sing under certain conditions.
I should not write a song because I'm angry at someone and I want to show them.
Oh, okay.
Right. I don't believe in writing vengeful songs. I believe in writing constructive songs that are meant to build, meant to make things better, and not feel good songs, but songs that grow us and build us.
Two of those songs, Chibok and what is the other one? Umkhonto.
Yes.
Where did they come from? What inspired them? What was happening when you decided? The light bulb came on and said.
Chibok, I am a mother of two beautiful kids. I could not imagine.
What are their names? Why are they nameless?
Zazi and Palo.
They must have names.
Zazi and Palo Dana. Those are my two beautiful kids. And I cannot imagine waking up one day and your children have been abducted and possibly used as sex slaves and whatever not. And you don't know if you'll ever see them again. So when that story broke, it really traumatized me. Just putting myself in the shoes of those parents, who don't know what's going on with their children, kids were taken by terrorists. It just, and I do not understand how women are used as collateral in these kinds of things. It's just one of those very sick things. And then children. That's even worse. What kind of a God or Allah do you subscribe to that would be okay with such atrocities, with such abuses towards the innocent? I do not understand that, and perhaps that's why I try and shy away from religion as much as possible, because I don't understand how sometimes people can use religion to do the most atrocious of things. I'm obviously not saying that that's what religion is. It's just how some people
use it.
So then I wrote this song, hoping that it would not. I mean, I did not write it to comfort. It was just perhaps maybe a selfish need for me to just bring out this trauma, because I was feeling so traumatized by just imagining what goes on in those forests. And it's called Sambiti Forest. What the Boko Haram is doing there. So perhaps it was a selfish undertaking, just dealing with my own trauma. And I really prefer for songs to be written from that first person perspective, because then that way, it's more authentic. It's how I'm feeling. It's how I'm feeling, and that feeling then can be transferred to the next person who's listening to the song, and they sing it like they own it, and they feel the same emotion. And therefore, perhaps I was putting out a message into the universe to right the wrongs,
Yeah.
that human beings sometimes orchestrate.
And the other one that intrigues me is Umkhonto.
Mkhonto.
Go for it.
Oh my gosh. I believe that there are different types of artists. It's just unfortunate that of late we've only seen more of the one type and not the other types. I also believe that music is not just for entertainment. It's not just for spiritual healing. It's also a means to introspect, to gauge where as a society we are. Because supposedly an artist is someone who's sitting on the mountain looking in, right, and seeing everything that happens there, but from almost an outsider perspective, but who's also an insider, who can then articulate it better because they're a bit removed from the situation than someone who's going through it. Therefore, I'm one of those kinds of artists who believes that I'm gifted in a way that helps others introspect, so that as a society we can correct ourselves and we can grow. Therefore, when I wrote Umkhonto, it was just soon after the news of the Gupta capture had broken.
The whole state capture thing.
Yes, and for me it was just like the last straw, kind of. I actually want to commend the people of this country that I think we've been very patient with ourselves. I want to say with ourselves, because I don't think the problem just stems from one point. I think it is endemic. The issue of corruption in South Africa and how we have this mentality of each to their own, where I'm kicking the ball to my house. I think it's very pervasive, whether we want to admit it or not. We have lost track. I remember when Madiba died, how it all gave us, an opportunity to introspect and just take stock, because he had stood as such a bright beacon of hope, visionary for what our future should be like. And when he passed, we then had to introspect and reflect on what his presence had meant and what his contribution had been to our growth as a society. And that is when I first felt that we were far away from where we had been in 94 in many ways. Now, when I wrote Umkhonto, asking ubukhali lo mkhonto okanye ubuthuntu lo mkhonto, I was obviously using Umkhonto as an analogy for the MK. Now, the MK is not ANC. The ANC is not ANC itself. The ANC is the people. It is more than just a political party. It is a family thing for most South Africans. And I felt it was perhaps time that we took stock and asked ourselves, are we still on the path to our emancipation, or are we not? Are we still fighting for our people, or are we fighting for other things? And I do believe the song came at a very important time, and I really wanted or hoped that it would create dialogue, and we would, even just on your own, you'd listen to this song and just take stock. Where are we? What are we doing? Are we still climbing the many mountains that we are meant to climb, as Madiba said? Or what are we doing? That's why I wrote Umkhonto.
Now, lastly, I wanted to ask you, which would you choose? Music or social activism?
Music.
You'd never go into politics?
No, I didn't say I would never go into politics.
Yes.
I believe I can do both if I really have to. I don't want to go into politics. I've seen...
As in party political...
Yeah, it's nasty. And I'm too outspoken for politics also.
Yeah, but was that you lack discipline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, now I've had fights with the DA, I've had fights with the ANC, I've had fights with the EFF. And at the time that all these fights happen, everyone thinks I'm against them. They're convinced, oh, you're pro-EFF, oh, you're pro-ANC. Okay, I've never been called pro-DA, thank God. But there has been that, because I only stand for the truth. That's what I do. And therefore, when the truth doesn't favor this side, then it means I'm pro the other side. Therefore, I worry about how I would do in politics. But now, as perhaps maybe a civil servant, where I can just focus on my work, right? If my work is language, I focus on language. If my work is education, I focus on that. Like right now, I'm studying, right? I'm doing my honors in development. I intend to continue and do my master's and my PhD.
Yeah.
I want to be called Dr. Simphiwe, but having studied for it. I'm doing this because I'm actually passionate about how we progress as a country. My work with the AU is also premised on that. So therefore, I definitely would want to go into politics if the issues that, concern me have not been dealt with, by the time I'm in my 50s.
Okay.
But really, I think I can focus on my singing and then continue doing these projects that I do, for instance, with the AU and Amnesty International to bring about the change that I want.
Okay. Simphiwe Dana, speaking her mind out as usual on Karibu. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much, Brahma.
And all the best with your studies
Thank you.
with your musical career and with your social activism.
Thank you very much.